feedback, both on workshops that you've come to in the past, what you liked, what you would see improved, and also topics for the future. So if you have something you're just dying to know about, let us know and we'll see what we can do. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right in for roofing. Okay, so what I'm hoping to cover tonight is starting with just different kinds of roofing. What are the different materials, pros and cons of those materials, cost of them? That can be a pretty overwhelming thing to look into if you don't know much about roofing. So we'll start there and then talk about inspecting and assessing our roof condition. So looking for damage, what a visual inspection we should be doing as a homeowner or even a renter, and what we should be relying on professionals to do. Then we'll go into a little bit about materials and tools needed and how to install shingles. And I will be kind of tailoring this mostly to shingles because that's what most of us have on our roofs at home. So I thought it would be helpful to kind of start out with like the parts of a roof, get some of this terminology in so that when I'm throwing in all these terms, we know a little bit about what's going on. And we also have this picture here that we can refer back to if I just start getting real nerdy into something. You guys can ask me to go back to this and we'll take a look. Can you all see my mouse when I'm moving it on the screen? Okay, I'm going to use that as my pointer here. So if we look at this very top of the roof, this very top is what we call the ridge line. So that's going to be the peak of any section of roof. So I would also have a ridge along this chimney section of the roof here. So the ridge is always at the top. The bottom of our roof, that's where we have our gutters attaching into, and we'll also see terms like fascia. That's basically the board that our gutters go into. And then these different like variations in the roof kind of planes. If it's making a point, like the ridge makes a point, but on the edge, those are called a hip. And if it's making a valley, it's called a valley. So that's kind of easy to remember, but those terms I might use a little bit tonight as well. And then we can also see over here where it says gable, gable end. Basically, this is talking about the side of your house where it makes a peak. This is just called the gable end. Like this and this and this, none of these are gables. The gable is where we have our peak. That kind of pointed side of our house is always called the gable end. So that's a little bit. I have another picture here that it's a little bit blurry, but it gives us a better look of what the actual roofing materials look like with some of those same terms, and this will help kind of you'll understand a little bit why these things are all called the same things. Like up here on our ridge, we also have our ridge vents and our ridge caps, which are both materials that we'll talk about tonight. So that's why it's important to know some of these terms right off the bat. We can also see over here on the left side some of the different layers of materials, which we will also go into tonight. This wood here, that's our sheathing, our OSB or plywood. Then this next black layer that's kind of in various places. This is our underlayment. And we're going to go into all of this in a little bit, but just to kind of, give you a little intro. And then you'll see flashing. And this is in different places, but this is just an extra protection, basically where our roof meets anything. So that's a chimney, a wall, the edge of the roof, in our valleys, kind of all over the place. And we'll go into some of the different types about that. Let's see. And then I guess one other thing I wanted to point out on both of these pictures is we can see in different parts that there's different pitched roofs. And basically what that means, I'm going to go back to this slide. A pitch is basically talking about the rise over the run. So if I look up at this top of the diagram here, this part that's going up, this is my rise. And then from, the very bottom corner over to where the peak is, that distance is my run. And between those two numbers, that gives me a pitch of a roof. So what you'll hear that it's basically like slope in geometry or algebra, the slope of your roof. So you'll hear things like 3.5, which is a pretty shallow roof, and then you'll hear 6, 5, 9, or sorry, 312, 612 is more steep, 1212 is almost like a 45-degree angle. So basically, that's telling you how steep your roof is. And then in these pictures, you can see there's some really low sloped, or I think this one has like a flat roof section, and then some of the main roof is a little bit more steep. And this will come in handy when we're trying to figure out what material would be right for us. Any questions on all of that? I know that's kind of a lot of terms. Okay, cool. All right, so this slide kind of overwhelming, but bear with me here. If we look all the way to the left, we'll start in this column, and this is basically going through different types of roofing. So going down in this column, there's all these different materials. Those are different options for your roof. And then going across the top, we have a lot more detail about the applied usage, like what conditions would we want this kind of material, how much does it cost, pros and cons. And I'm not going to read through all of this. This is you all will get a copy of this presentation also, so all of this information you can use to reference. But I'm mostly going to be looking at use, cost, and lifespan. That's kind of usually what we consider when we're trying to decide what we should be roofing with. So most commonly, we would be using these asphalt shingles over here. So that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about tonight. That's the most common thing in North America to use, and it's also pretty cost effective. And there are two types of asphalt shingles, 3-tab and architectural shingles. And I'm going to go into the differences between those on the next slide. But just to see what some of your other options are, you do have like different kinds of shingles that would, it's a similar concept as the asphalt shingles, which we're going to learn how to put on tonight, but they're made out of different materials. So this would be like your cedar shake shingles, if you ever see slate or wood, and those basically I think used to be more popular and used to kind of be the industry standard. Now we have asphalt shingles, which are kind of made of asphalt and fiberglass, and it's more durable, it's cheaper to manufacture. So that's why now we see the prices of some of these really skyrocketing, right? And that doesn't really make it super accessible to us now, so they're less common. But I think between this asphalt and metal roofing is also pretty common and fairly cost effective. As you can see over here, the metal roofing has a really long life expectancy. So if you want to just make an investment and not worry about your roof for the rest of your life, you could do a metal roof, especially if you're in somewhere that has heavy snowfall. The metal roof is great for just having that snow run right off. You maybe don't want to deal with maintenance, so that would be a good option. Otherwise, asphalt shingles are perfectly good for just about everything we're dealing with in the US. So, like I said, this is a good slide for you all to reference, but I'm not going to go too much into any more detail on this one. Okay, so this is kind of breaking down more the asphalt shingles, which is what we use, between the differences between 3-tab and architectural. So basically, 3-tab I have over here on the left. These are, this was basically the most common thing to use like 10 years ago. Now we have architectural shingles, which are just the newest, best thing to use. So there's nothing wrong with 3-tab shingles. They are basically the same concept, but the architectural are beefed up a little bit. So if you look at the layers between these shingles, this is the top that we see, right? The very top edge. But then all of this stuff underneath it is called the underlayment for your shingles. And you don't really need to know all of this, but basically it's thicker, there's more layers. The beefier the shingle, the more resistant it is. That's kind of the gist of it. So because it's thicker and stronger, it has a higher wind resistancy. it also lasts longer, it also costs more. That's kind of how it goes, right? So our 3-tab shingles, they have a 20-year lifespan and they cost, about $30 for a bundle of shingles, whereas our architectural, they last 30 years and they're about $40 per bundle. So, if you're trying to determine which one you should use, I always recommend the architectural because basically you're already making the investment to buy a whole new roof, pay for the labor. It takes the exact same amount of time to install them. So rather than do it again in 20 years, might as well get 30 years out of it and, pay a little bit more initially. So that's kind of my take on it. Okay, now we're going to start moving into how we would assess for damage on our roofs. So this is assuming we have some kind of water damage. And basically, you're either going to see it or you're going to feel it. Hopefully, neither of those is happening, but there's a lot of prevention that you can do, which I guess I'll start with that to avoid problems. But that's number 4 down here. And basically, your prevention is just routinely inspecting your roof. So this can be you inspecting your roof, either you're up on your roof cleaning it off, or you're just looking when you drive home every day, especially after big storms, making sure you don't have branches up there, any kind of damage. That's most likely when it would happen for us. And then you can also get your roof professionally inspected. And this doesn't need to happen after every storm. We're looking like every few years, especially as your roof is starting to age into that life expectancy. So if you're at like 18 out of 20 years on your roof, probably want to be getting that inspected because all of this damage, it's better to catch it before it happens or get a new roof maybe a year before you absolutely need one rather than have a bunch of damage because the ways that a water leak can affect our home really accumulates quickly in terms of damage and cost. So what are we looking for when we're assessing our roof? Basically, if you're on the inside of your home, you're looking for any kind of water stains, soft spots, actually feeling a wet spot, or if you get up in your attic, maybe you don't feel comfortable getting on a roof. If you get up in your attic, you can see if there's any water coming through to the underside of your roof sheathing, that OSB or plywood that's on your roof, or if you have any damage to your rafters. You'll be able to see all of that from the inside. So let's say you have some water damage. First thing you want to do is figure out the source of that water. If you maybe have a wet spot in your kitchen ceiling and probably didn't originate in the attic, probably came from your roof. So we would need to find, look for signs of water running down rafters, running down the sheathing, anything to help you kind of figure out where that water started from. It could be up further on your roof for all we know. So first thing we need to do is locate that. And then once we have it located, we can figure out like maybe that's a missing shingle and I can fix it myself. Maybe I get up in my attic and I see that there's a whole big water spot and stuff is rotting. At that point, we would determine, hey, maybe this is a little bit out of my scale, my comfort zone here, and that should be done by a professional. And in terms of like how to make that judgment call, I think a roof really isn't something to mess around with. So if you're hesitant or especially if you're nervous at all to be up on your roof, it's not worth it for you to be up there. If you're freaking out while you're on your roof, then you're more likely to make a mistake or to have an accident. So, I would recommend getting some professional advice. That being said, we are totally capable of doing this stuff on our own. So it's a good idea to get a little bit of practice first. So come out to Habitat and work with us. You could do your shed roof or a dog house, something that's a little bit lower stakes than like the home you live in, at least until you're a bit more comfortable. And I do have some pictures on this next slide of what this damage could look like. So over here on the interior damage, these are all pretty obvious signs that something's wrong, but any kind of, bubbling, spots, dampness coming through our drywall. This could also be on a wall, like it could have dripped down inside a wall. So really, anytime we're seeing this, we know we need to do some investigating. And then the exterior side, this is all stuff you can see without getting up on your roof. So this top picture here, this is what it looks like, basically the eave of your roof. So it's hanging, if this is our wall and this is our roof, I'm looking over here. It's outside of my wall. On the outside of my home, I can look up and I see like all of this stuff is rotting. So that's no good. I can see in here, I have big water spots on some of my sheathing. And some of this stuff like could also be old, especially if you live in an older home. So that's also something to be aware of. And you can't really tell if it's old or new until it's raining and you feel like, is this wet? Like, am I getting new water put on this, or is this just a stain? And, I've had it re-roofed since this has been an issue. So also be aware of that. Another picture here of what that staining would look like, and you can see it's starting to get into our rafter here. So definitely want to address this soon. Okay, so some other areas to look at for damage. Remember from our first slide, our fascia, that's this board here that our gutters attach into. So if this stuff is rotting or cracking, obviously that's, getting water onto it over and over again. So that's no good. And if this board is rotting, our gutter is probably going to fall out, because that's how our gutter is anchored into our house. If that board is rotted, then our gutter is going to fall off sooner or later. Also, we want to make sure that we are doing proper gutter maintenance. And it might sound like that's not exactly related to your roof, but it is. So if our gutter here is all clogged up with leaves, well, one, it's more likely to fall off because it's heavy and full of leaves. Two, I don't have proper runoff from my roof. So the gutters are there to help us direct water from the roof away from our home. If that's not happening, then the water is spending more and more time up on your roof. And also debris can build up on your roof. So if you have a bunch of pine needles or leaves sitting there, basically it's a place that water can come and sit there and hang out, and it doesn't care about your shingles. So it can create molding. It can just like hold all that moisture on there, and that's no good either. So that's why gutters are an important thing to maintain. And also, if you are comfortable or have somebody that you can hire, you should blow off your roof for any of that stuff that does accumulate, because it's going to happen, and it's not something you need to worry about every storm. But you don't want stuff sitting up there 12 months of the year just piling more and more on. That's essentially a compost pile. You don't want compost on your roof, right? So we want to get that stuff off, from time to time. And then this other picture, we can see our soffit. This is soffit here. This is fascia where our gutter is attached into. If this is wet and rotting from this point, it probably means there's a leak like coming from the top of our roof, because it's not raining upside down enough that would be an issue. Like, it is going to get wet in storms and stuff, but it shouldn't be rotting like that. So if you're seeing stuff like that, also time to address it. Okay, and then of course there's the shingles themselves. So our shingles are going to wear and tear over time. That's how we figure out our life expectancy. So that 20 to 30 years, that's basically telling us when our new shiny tough shingles are going to be deteriorated enough to where they're not really doing their job anymore. So what this looks like is some granules missing off of our shingles. So the stuff that makes it tough and resistant to damage is those asphalt and fiberglass particles that are on that outside layer. So if we start seeing big patches of those missing, like over here in this picture, that's no good. We don't want, so if this is happening on our whole roof, time for us to get a new roof. If this is only happening on a few shingles, you can see in some of these pictures where, okay, obviously right here in this gutter, I'm catching a ton of water, but over here I'm totally fine. We don't need a new roof. We can just replace some of these shingles. Same thing with this. If it starts to be like this, where it's like the whole side of our house, probably we're looking at a roof replacement or a re-roof. And we'll talk a little bit more about the differences between those. So yeah, we're looking for missing granules, any broken pieces where we have huge chunks of the shingles off, curling up of shingles, broken shingles, missing shingles, anything like that, we want to address it as soon as we can. Any questions on damage, assessing roofs? This kind of a lot, but this is probably like the best thing you can do as a homeowner or renter is just be assessing your own roof.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at assessing your roof, how often realistically should you be doing it? I know you said not after every storm, but like, is it like once every month, 2 months, kind of just keep an eye on it?
Yeah, so I think anytime we have like a super heavy storm, like I know we have a hurricane coming our way this weekend, I'm probably gonna be checking on it on, after big storms, but then, just normal like wear and tear that we're checking on once a year, I would say.
Okay. Okay.
To actually like get up there, look around, make sure. And the other thing to think about is like sometimes we can't see our whole roof from the bottom. Like I could see my whole front roof when I drive up to my house, but I never see the back of my roof. So there could be a hole in the middle of that, and I wouldn't know until I have, a puddle in the kitchen. So stuff like that. That's why after storms, I would do a good visual like walk around your house and see, and then maybe once a year hop up there and make sure everything's okay. And then, yeah, like I said, every few years for like a professional to come and inspect it would be good.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I said this on the last slide, but let's say we found some damage and we need to know, are we going to replace our roof or are we going to re-roof it? And so what is the difference between those? Basically, replace, I mean like take off all the shingles, address any underlying issues, kind of start from scratch. Re-roof is kind of just what it sounds like. I'm going to roof it again, meaning I'm going to put shingles over top of my existing shingles. So when you're trying to decide which one of those you need to do, or if you're having estimates by people coming out and they're telling you different things, this is some stuff to consider. So your roof should be replaced, meaning we take off all the shingles and redo it. If we have like a ton of damaged or missing shingles, so like this last picture, if I'm down here and it's like the whole side of my house is messed up, I'm probably going to replace all these shingles. If we're having leaks in the roof, or if we've already re-roofed it once, you can only put 2 layers of shingles max on a roof. So let's say I already have 2 layers. It's time I have to take all of that off and start from scratch. And you can only do this, you can only put shingles over other shingles. So if I have a metal roof and I want to put shingles down, I have to take the metal off. Shingles can only go over top of shingles. Same thing. If I have like cedar shake or a slate roof or something, I can't put asphalt shingles over that. So those are all cases where we would need to replace the roof, and especially if we have damage to the sheathing or the underlayment that our shingles are going on top of. If that stuff is rotting, then we don't want to just keep covering it up. That's not going to address the actual issues. So I guess pros and cons for the replacing. The pros are obviously that we can fix those underlying things. So if we see, I have 3 or 4 spots in my roof where rafters are starting to rot, I could take all these shingles off, get everything squared away before I re-roof it. And it's also like a good opportunity to redesign your house, which I don't know if we would all put a new roof on to redesign. Maybe we would just paint a few walls, but that would be a perk to, getting this new roof, because the downside is it is expensive to roof. So if you have to replace stuff and, take everything off, it takes more time, it takes more money. But again, like I said, the roof is really not something that we want to be compromising on, right? So when can we re-roof then? So let's say we have 1 layer of shingles, so we can go over it with a 2nd layer. And also, like, our shingles are they're wearing, but they're not damaged. So this is like that, this wear and tear. We're starting to see some granules missing, but I'm not having problems with it. I'm not having leaks. I don't have any pieces curled up. So I can put a new layer over top of that just fine. This is something that, if it's kind of nearing the end of its life expectancy, I'm in that 18, 19, 20 years, it's time we can re-roof it. And so the pros of this is, if we're just going right over top of it, it's a pretty easy, fast process, especially if you have it done by contractors. They're just going to come in with new shingles, bright and shiny new ones, put them down over top, do it the exact same way, and you're done. The only downside to this is, obviously, like we talked about over here, it's not an option for every house. So you have to be a good candidate for re-roofing, and that's something that your contractor should be able to tell you, like, hey, you only have 1 layer, we can just shingle right over this if you want. So if you already know those things about your roof, then you're less likely to kind of get a bad deal by a contractor saying, oh no, we got to take it all off, there's all this stuff going on. You're like, no, I just did an inspection, I don't want that. You can have all that information for yourself, right? And then I did also put an article down here that kind of goes a little bit more in depth about what we just talked about. So this link down here, you guys can check out on your own. So any questions about this so far? Let's see. Yes, I saw a chat question in the chat. Is patching the roof an option? Yes, it is, and we are going to cover that in just a little bit. So let me see. Go to the next slide. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start getting into us working with roofing and kind of what materials and tools we would need to do that, and then how we do it. So starting out, we need our sheathing, which is, the wood layer basically. And this can be either OSB, which is this one on the left, or plywood. And basically the difference is OSB is cheaper. This is what you should use on your roof for majority, if not all of your roof. The benefit to using plywood is it's pretty. So if this is going to be in a visible section of our roof, which is going to be, if we're on this gable end of our roof, sometimes there's like an overhang that sticks out like this, right, past the side of our house. So this is the side my roof hangs off a little bit. If that section that's hanging off is visible from the bottom, we would use plywood, which basically paints easier, it looks nicer, as compared to this OSB, which is just kind of a rough, not so good finish. This is what Habitat does. They have plywood on the eaves, OSB on the rest of the roof. So that would be your first layer. Then we have our underlayment, which, if we're thinking back to those first slides, that's that black layer. And that's going to be either tar paper or some kind of ice and water shield. Basically, this is a layer that acts as a vapor barrier. So it's not going to let you know, raindrops in, but it's also not going to let condensation get into your attic. So this is going to make sure that we don't have, yeah, a bunch of condensation, which is, you know, not rain, but it is a form of water that could damage our roof. So that's why we need this underlayment option. And these are both links to tar paper and ice and water shield. So you can, you know, find those easy at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. And then we have our starter strip. Not supposed to say strip, not step, but starter strip. And then our actual roofing material, which for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about shingles. Then we need our nails and button caps. And those are these two pictures down here. So our roofing nails always have this nice wide head on them. That's to give us more surface area, like a larger area to grip our shingle, hold it to the roof, make sure that it's less likely to pull off. And then this one here, this is the button cap, and this is what we would use to put down our tar paper or our underlayment. And same idea, it's got a nice wide cap. It's going to give me more surface area to hold down this layer. And then in terms of, you know, the length of your roofing nails, no shorter than 1.25 inches. And this should be penetrating into the sheathing. Like, so we should be able to see the nails poking through in our attic, but we don't want it poking through like 3 inches. That's excessive. It's not going to do anything additional, but basically if it's not sticking through, if it's not sticking through into our attic, then that means it's only going into our, you know, 1/2 inch sheathing, just a little bit, and we want that to have a little more bite. So if it's poking through, it's biting in more. If stuff's sticking into the attic like 3 inches, you know, obviously it's a hazard for us when we're walking around, but also we don't want to be poking anything it shouldn't be poking, which could be pipes or insulation, other stuff going on in your attic. So sometimes, yeah, that's kind of why we don't want too long of a nail. And then also we need to consider if it's a single or double layer of shingles. So if it's a double layer, I'm going through more stuff. Same thing applies. I want this sticking through my sheathing a little bit so we can kind of calculate that length of nail that we would need. And then flashing, which we saw a little bit on those first slides, and I'm going to go into more detail around that. But again, the flashing is an additional layer of protection for anything that our roofing shingles come in contact with. Let's see. Okay, so somebody asked, is that like Tyvek? Tyvek is basically, it is also a vapor barrier, but Tyvek is usually for like the siding, like the walls of your house, and tar paper is the equivalent for roofing.
So the Caitie,
yeah,
the ice and water shield, is that what it's called? Or if you go to look for it?
So tar paper and ice and water shield are two separate things.
Right.
Yeah, so tar paper is like the generic, yeah, the generic black paper. Ice and water shield is something that is required in certain areas. So this is something that we need to check like local building codes about. Like I'm in North Carolina and we require ice and water shield, which is specifically designated for areas that could hold like snow load, basically.
Okay.
So that in North Carolina, it's 2 feet from where your wall is. So let's say this is my exterior wall, my roof hangs over. I need to be from the edge of my roof 2 feet in past my exterior wall with ice and water shield, and then the rest can be tar paper. So I don't think that that's required in Washington. I don't remember ever doing that at Habitat, but it's something to think about depending on where you are. Good questions. Okay, let's see. Okay, so here is some of the different kinds of flashing that we would have on our roofing potentially. So I guess we'll start with this valley flashing because this is pretty easy. So in that corner where our roof is, this basically is a big piece of metal that goes in that corner, and then we shingle over that. So basically my shingles overlap this. There's no way for water to get anywhere in this valley. And you can just do this with shingles. There is a way to do that without using the flashing piece, but we know that we're going to be catching lots of water, lots of leaves falling down here, so the flashing can be helpful here. And then up here in this picture, our flashing is this number 4. So we see 6 is our underlayment, our sheathing, 5, or this is our sheathing. This is our underlayment, either that tar paper or ice and water shield. And then my shingle layer goes down here, and my flashing actually goes over top of my shingles and underneath my siding. So this piece is really making sure that nothing can get in this groove here. And then I'm going to cover it up some with my siding, and some of it will just remain visible to the eye, but it doesn't look bad. And then this will get nailed here, and some tar goes over it. So we got a really good seal. And this continuous flashing would be like on a porch roof, something like that is where we would use this. Drip edge is another kind of flashing, and this basically is what goes on the very bottom of my roof. So, the opposite of the ridge is the bottom, and that's where this drip edge goes. And this is basically going to ensure that the water rolls off of my shingles, and instead of going onto the top of this fascia board, it's got a little edge that it can roll down to kind of convince that water to not get into my wood, right? And then over here we have step flashing. This would be like if we're going up a dormer, or something sticking out of our roof, like a chimney would also have step flashing. And this basically gets layered in as we put down the shingles. So I put down a shingle, I put down flashing, my next shingle would go on top of this flashing, and it basically just makes sure that there's no way that a little drop of water can come from up here and get behind anything. So always think of it as you're like roofing. If you were water, make sure that there's no opportunity for you to get in anywhere. Let's see, trick or treat. Okay, cool. All right, so if we're doing roofing ourselves, what kind of tools do we need? So if we're removing shingles, if we're just doing a patch job, we're going to need a flat bar and a hammer. We're taking the whole roof off. I put a link to this roofing shovel, but it's really cool. It's got these spikes on the end, and it basically helps you get underneath the layer, pop out the nails, toss over the shingles. It's a really efficient way if you have to take off a whole roof. I've done it a few times, and you want one of those, okay? For the install, also we can do this with a hammer if we're just doing a patching job. If you want to go hardcore, you can get a roofing gun, which are pretty fun. Also, some other tools that we need to cut is this razor knife. You can get hook blade attachments, which in theory cut right through the shingle. These can be kind of hard to use and get an accurate cut, especially if it's cold. If your shingles are cold, it's hard to use. So I also like to have a pair of shears, which cut through really smooth. And then we have a stapler. So this would be, if you didn't use those button caps that we just saw and you wanted to staple your underlayment, you can get a stapler like this for pretty cheap. So not too bad for tools. All right, let's start talking install. So I'm going to go through kind of layer by layer. And I'm going to try to stay within our hour. I haven't done this presentation before, so I'm not sure how long it is, but I got lots of videos linked in here too. So you guys have, a reference point if I don't get to everything, but starting with our underlayment. So again, that would be either our ice or water or our tar paper. And this, I'm assuming if we're installing our underlayment that our roof is in good condition. So we don't have a bunch of rotten spots. We also want to get all of the nails pulled out. So those are, you know, all those punctures in the roof. We don't want a bunch of nails sticking through that aren't doing anything. So at the very least, we need to pound them in to make sure our shingles go down nice and flat. So then if we look at this picture up at the top right here, this is that drip edge that I was talking about. And we want this to be the first thing that we do on the very bottom edge of our roof. So we're gonna put this drip edge, and then we're gonna put, you know, our underlayment and our shingles and everything on top of it. But this gives you, this little cutout shows you, let's say I had rain coming in sideways and it could get up under my shingle. Well, now I know that this very bottom edge is still protected. And that's one of the most common areas to have damaged underlayment is on this very front edge. So using that drip edge can kind of save you a bunch, right? And then on my gable, I actually want it going over my underlayment. So it kind of crisscrosses a little bit in this pattern here. And the reason being, same thing, if you're a drop of water and you're coming from the side, I don't want to be able to get up and under my underlayment. Up and under my underlayment. That's a good one. Right, so if I'm coming from this direction, I know I'm protected by my drip edge. And really the big key with this, the ice and water shield actually sticks on tar paper, we just nail it on, but we just want to get off to a good straight start when we're doing this. So hopefully the edge of your roof is straight. If not, a good way to double check that is to snap a chalk line. And basically that's just giving me a straight line a little bit further up on my roof so I can put my underlayment to that edge. So if you didn't have a straight edge, this would help you. And the reason this helps is like when we're starting to put shingles on, we also want that to be going in a straight line. So when we're working on the roof and everything's straight, it's really easy to tell if we get off. If my underlayment's running this way and my shingles are this way, it can be easy to kind of get off track. So hopefully that all makes sense. Yeah, I think I got everything on that. Okay, moving along. So after we got our underlayment down on our whole roof, next comes our starter strip. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's the first layer that I'm putting down on the very edge of my roof. And the purpose of this starter strip, if you can see, it's got this this tar line right here, or this line down here. This tar actually helps the shingles adhere to each other once they're on and they get heating up in the sun. So it's going to help my layers stick together. And the starter strip is giving me that tar line on the very first edge of my roof. So when I put this first row of shingles down, it's sticking to this, and it's less likely that anything is going to get up and under that. If it does, I know I have my drip edge there to protect me. But that's kind of the purpose of this starter strip, and we'll do that on the bottom edge and on both of our gables. So like right here, going up the side, I would also have a starter strip for the exact same reason, so that it's got something to adhere the edge of my shingles to. So if we see in this kind of bottom middle picture, the starter strip is flipped upside down. Now that doesn't harm anything, but it's not helping anything. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing there. So the starter strip, you can, you know, you can buy a bundle of these when you're getting shingles. Also, you can actually use the 3-tab shingles if you just cut this shingle in half lengthwise. This strip, you can use it the same way as a starter strip. So let's say you're doing a shed roof, you only need 3 bundles of shingles, and if you got to pack a starter strip, you would waste most of it. So let's say you just want to be kind of crafty and do it that way. Absolutely an option, because really what we need is that tar strip. Just make sure you cut a straight line. Let's see, I think that's everything for, yeah, starter strips. Okay. Okay, so now on to our shingle install. So let's see, I think the first thing to figure out is you should always be starting in the bottom left corner of your roof. So if I'm looking at the roof in this bottom picture, I'm starting down here and I'm going to work my rows across and put them in line. And then you also want to establish a shingle pattern. So this picture is for a 3-tab shingle. And basically the goal is I don't want any seams overlapping right over another seam, because that essentially means there's no shingle under that. Water can easily get in. So for a 3-tab shingle, I just cut it back to have my next stagger land in the middle of one of those 3 tabs on a 3-tab shingle, and then keep doing that as we go. And then for the architectural shingles, it's a little bit different, but I put a link in here which I would recommend watching. It's called a book, basically, because all of these, when you have them in a stack, they kind of look like pages of a book. So they call it cut a book, which means cut your stagger pattern. And it shows you a good way to do it so that you have you use 3 full shingles and make your whole pattern and don't have any waste. And you cut them into even sort of dimensions. So I don't know if that made sense, but that video shows you a super easy way to do it. And then once I have my shingles on, my next one, keep on going. And then you have to do, them in sequential order. So I always have to have my bottom row before I can put my second row on top, before I can put my third and fourth. Small piece, that's just going to be a full 3-tab shingle or full size architectural shingle on top, and then it would be this same pattern repeated again. So then I would go to this one that's cut back, it would fall in the middle of my tab all the way up. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then I put a picture over here for the nailing pattern. So this also isn't rocket science. Basically, we want 4 nails in a shingle for low sloped roofs. And if we have a super steep roof like 10-12 or 12-12, like think of like a barn roof where it's like really, really steep roofs. In that case, we want to put 6 nails in our shingles to just help it give it a little extra bite into our roof. But the nails on these, we don't want them on the very edge, and then we just kind of want them evenly spaced. So you don't need to be measuring as you go. Normally I put, if this is my shingle, I come in an inch on either side and then split the difference between those, so they're all kind of equidistant across. And then on the architectural shingles, they actually have a line here, and this line is going to go through basically the double layer in my shingle here, and that's the thickest part of the shingle, so I have the most bite in my nail, and also it will nail the shingle underneath it as well. So there is a term called high nailing, which basically would mean, like, let's say I nail all of it, up here. The downside to that is, and you shouldn't do this, is that I have nails going into 1 layer of shingles. If I nail it on the nailing line, which is where it's recommended that you do it, then I'm nailing into this shingle and the one over it and into the roof. So that's helping me make sure all of those layers are tying together nice and tight. Right, so let's see. Yeah, we never want 2 seams overlapping, nailing in the correct place. And then when I get to the other end of my roof, basically opposite of this stagger pattern, I'm just going to cut the shingle for the space that I have left to finish that row. So that's easy on that end of the roof. Just cut it to fit. Either you can lay it down and cut it with your hook blade, or you can measure it, cut it with your shears. Either way would work just fine. And then we also have to remember to flash around any roof penetrations as we go, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. in a minute. I'm going to talk about it right now. So, flashing. Oops. Flashing. Basically, thinking back to that slide that had the different types. Any other kind of penetrations in our roof, we would want to basically flash them, which means waterproof them. And I think for this, I'm going to go ahead and play this video because it'll explain it just as well as I can. All right, here we go. So let me see.
First, make sure the roof is clear. Get waterproof. Challenge should make it. Install starting. Be sure to put for good water requirements. Once you're push down over the temperature pipe in. Wash again waterproof fingers and fingers. Then secure in order to next flashing by running water over it from a hose for 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, so as we could see in that video, we go back to full screen. I don't know. Okay, well, still works, I think. So as we can see here, basically the idea is we want to shingle all the way up to the bottom of either our pipe or our vent, and then put that pipe or vent boot or flashing, those are both names for it, down over our pipe, and then cut our shingles, kind of notch them around it. And as you could see in the video, he still followed all the same stagger patterns and just kept notching it until we could fit a full shingle across the top without needing to cut it at all. And then I put in lots of other info here just in case anybody had questions, but basically this boot here is for a pipe, and they make these in all the sizes they make pipes in, so inch, 2-inch, and this would be like your sewer vent, yeah, any kind of plumbing vents. And then this more boxy looking one, that's like air ventilation from your attic. So that is something to be aware of. You have to have ventilation in your attic. If it's not properly ventilated, that could cause your shingles to curl up, which we saw earlier in the presentation. And also it could hold moisture in your attic. It's obviously going to be hot as heck up there, so you're probably going to be losing more money for heating and cooling costs. So I did put in a couple links, one to figure out how much venting you need in your attic, and basically this depends on the square footage of your attic. So assuming we have a vapor barrier on our roof, we need a vent for every 150 square foot of attic space. So I put that there. And then there is also stuff called continuous ridge vent, which essentially is something that goes all the way up on the ridge of your roof. And instead of needing to box out with all those vents and flash around it, this piece of plastic actually just bends over your ridge. And it's great because it's pretty easy to install. We don't have to cut a bunch of shingles like to notch around it. And it's right at the very peak of our roof, whereas some of these other ridge vents can be further down in the roof. So at the very peak, you're getting the hottest air out of your roof. So I did put a link to that, which I just showed you, and then also a video that shows how to install them. They're pretty easy. And then, you know, all of these pipes are usually kind of towards the end of our roof, or the top of our roof, not the end, the top of our roof. And so once we work up all the way to the top, we want to shingle those layers up as close as we can. And then we put our ridge cap on, which I'm going to show a video for the ridge cap as well. And the ridge cap is just that very top edge of our roof. I think this guy's pretty funny. We don't really need all that.
Most important is because if you finally get to the top of your roof, your last layer of protection on your roof that stops water right at the very deep of your roof or on hips. So when it comes to installing your capping, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pay attention to your local area. Our local area has prevailing winds from the southwest going to the northeast. So that would mean that the wind comes from that side of the roof this way. So we always start at the opposite side of the prevailing winds and go in towards them. The reason for that is when I install them this way, the wind's going to blow across the capping, not against the tower. If I'm going to go back, the wind is more likely to grab the capping and lift it up, peeling it off your roof, and that's definitely not something you want because that's going to cause your here is because I'm not installing ridge vent, I actually put a box vent in this roof. I overlap my shingles to the opposite side of the roof. Most guys will cut these off because they say it will hold your capping up. I say to leave that on there because if your capping were to ever fall off, it's an added layer of protection. Just personal preference, you can cut it off if you want at the ridge, but I recommend leaving it just for extra protection. So when it comes to installing your first capping, most guys will put their first cap and start going. What I like to do is put the first cap so I can put this tar line on the gable end of my roof. So I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. So and I'm cutting the color mat side off of it.
This is like the same idea as using
Like so.
starter
So
strip, right? We want that tar.
For the end of your roof when you're finishing, this is the piece you want. You're going to put that on your gable end. And the reason you're doing that is because when you put your next capping to start, you can see now it has tar adhesion, which will help it for any winds that may lift against that first cap. Your first one, like I said, you're going to go ahead. I like to nail this one about an inch in from my gable end. Like so. Pull it down nice and tight. And about an inch in. Then you're going to take your first full cap right on top of that. Making sure you're about 50-50 shining the cap on this side and this side. If you're having trouble figuring that out, what you can do for your first cap is bend it. Try not to crack this side. If you crack this side, what's going to happen is over time, it's going to deteriorate even faster, and it's still good for your roof because it's going to deteriorate faster than the rest, and it's going to cause leaks right here on your gable end. So fold your first cap in half, bending only the back side. As you can see, I have 50 and 50. And it will sit perfectly on my ridge line, and now I know exactly where my first cap can sit, and I can use that to gauge the rest of the way down the cap. Again, you're going to put 2 nails just inside the tar line, on the tar line, just behind it. Don't go on the color dot side, go on the dark side.
Okay, so that's kind of the gist of it, and you all can finish up the video because I'm kind of getting short on time, but you would just go all the way down the line like that to do your ridge cap for your roof. And this, yeah, same thing like he said, you would want to do this on your hip roofs as well, so those corners coming on your roof also get a ridge cap. And I appreciated how he also talked about the wind, which is something to consider, and showed you a few extra little tips on that. Okay, so repair and replacement. So let's say this is kind of the end also for anybody who has to go. If you need to run, go ahead. But so if we just have a few shingles that are damaged like this, it's super easy for us to take those out and put a new one in. So basically we need to remove the old shingle, and we do this with that flat bar tool that I was talking about. The first step, we just need to break that tar line. So we've talked about the tar as a benefit a lot, but now we need to just unstick it a little bit so we can get under there and get the nails out. So we want to be pretty gentle when we're breaking the tar, and then we need to get under all the nails, which hopefully if somebody followed the nailing pattern, we kind of know where those are. You can use your flat bar to pop up the head of it, so it's just sticking out, and then you can grab it a little bit easier with your the other end of your flat bar or your hammer. Go ahead and pull those out until we can slide our shingle loose. Once we slide it loose, then we put our new one in, and if our tar is already broken on the shingle above it, then we could just, you know, go in there, re-nail it, put it back down. And then when we do that, we want to make sure we're using new nail holes, right? So if I already have a nail that's been in that, it's not going to have as much grab as a new, brand new hole will. So use a new hole. And then also we want to make sure that we fill any of our old nail holes with some tar, which basically will waterproof it, plug that hole. And then we can also put tar on any of those, any of the flaps that we needed to lift up and break that seal. We'll put a little bead of tar down to help reseal it. And I do have 2 videos here for 3-tab or architectural replacement. Basically just goes through a little bit more detail of those steps, and it's always helpful to see somebody do it. So it just shows somebody popping those nails out and kind of their thought process going through. But I guess one other thing to note on the replacement, it's always better to replace with shingles instead of just like caulking stuff or cementing stuff. Like I don't really want to be gluing a bunch of shingles down to my roof. So if that's like a quick fix until you get your shingle color in or something, then fine. But yeah, definitely go with those shingles. And like I said, this is a good thing that you can do to maintain your roof instead of, you know, waiting until you have a leak or waiting 30 years until you replace the whole thing. So this is something if after a storm you are more than capable of doing on your own at home. And I think that's all I have tonight. Sorry I didn't get to more of the videos, but if anybody has questions here at the end, let me know. And Tracy or Beth will also be sending out this email or an email following up with a survey and this PowerPoint. So yeah.
I do have a quick question. We talked a lot about how to repair. Are there any basic roof safety things that you would recommend? Just like, you know, I'm a homeowner, but I've never been on my roof. And that's something that I just want to make sure I'm doing as safe as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think, like I said before, if you are hesitant, then it's more likely that it's not safe, because just any kind of unsuredness, yeah, just like if you're anxious, nervous, probably not a good idea to get up there. But otherwise, you know, when you're using a ladder to get up, let's say this is the edge of my roof and this is my ladder, I want that ladder sticking over 3 feet on my roof, which is about 3 ladder rungs. And one reason is, you know, we want to be able to have and kind of, it acts as like a handle for us so we can keep stepping up and we have something to grab as we transfer onto the roof. If that ladder is just, you know, right here at the edge, then you kind of start crawling onto your roof, and you're already off to a bad start. So, you know, that's one good thing to do. Another thing is you can get a harness and harness in. Definitely, if you're going to be up there for a long time, should definitely have a harness. And I think anything over like a 512 roof, I don't walk around on without a harness. If it's a really shallow roof, you know, a 3 or 412 roof, it's pretty comfortable to walk around. I mean, it takes a second to just acclimate when you're up there, but anything steeper than that, I would go ahead and harness and rope up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, any other questions, feel free to chat them or type in.
Just a quick question, and I think it's probably about preference, but there's a lot of different colors of roofs. I mean, so, and the material pretty much would be the same. Is that what you just go with your preference? And
Yep. So all the asphalt shingles, yeah, they come in all kinds of crazy colors now. I mean, mostly black and gray, but they have like reds and greens and browns. All of that, yeah, same thing, all asphalt, all fiberglass shingles, but yeah, color preference. Yeah, good questions. Thanks for typing in, and everybody for coming tonight. I hope this was a good new topic. And yeah, like I said, look out for that email for feedback and other info to give us, but otherwise that's all I got.
Thanks so much, Caitie, and thanks everyone for attending. So that's a wrap, I guess. Hopefully we'll see you guys next month for decks and porches, I believe is what's up next.
I think that's what I said, yeah.
Yeah, so we're excited for that one. That's another new class. So thanks everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Caitie.
All right. All right. Hey, Ruth.
All right.
Hey, sorry,
I have some information from Tracy, but then she said she was going to follow up next week. So I'm going to reread that email and figure it out because I sort of think immediacy is better than not. So
sounds good. Yeah, I think either way.
Right. Well, thank you so much as always.
Yeah, thanks.